Looks like we're online, guys. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming for today's webinar. I hope you're gonna find it very interesting and informative, and we'll spend the next hour with your pleasure. My name is Alex. I'm gonna be a moderator today, so I'm not just the main person. We have this webinar organized together with a company called CrazyLabs. CrazyLabs is a leader in hyper-casual games development and publishing. So when it comes to hyper-casual mobile games publishing, the biggest win of the company is not being in top 3 mobile games publisher or crossing 4.5 billion downloads. The biggest win of the company is its partners, CrazyLabs partners with over 350 game development studios all around the world. So I want to introduce you our 2 speakers at today's webinar. Shai Sasson, Head of Publishing at CrazyLabs.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you.
And Surojit Roy, Head of Studio at Firescore Interactive.
Hey guys, thanks Alexander.
So before we begin, I just want to stress one little point, guys, who watches us. Please pay attention. You have chat and Zoom and in YouTube. You can bring your comments and your questions there. By the end of webinar, we're going to have a Q&A session. We pick the best questions, and they will be answered by our speakers, Shai and Surojit. So please don't be shy. Bring them there. I'll pick the best ones. So Shai, please begin. Welcome on stage.
Thank you, Alex. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm happy that we're able to join this webinar to discuss and understand the process of having multiple #1 hits. Before we start, for those who don't know CrazyLabs, so CrazyLabs is the top 3 game publisher worldwide. As Alex mentioned, we have over 4.5 billion downloads to date. And yes, we work with over 350 developers worldwide. Here are some of the games that we've released and published over time. A few of the examples, DIY Makeup, one of our recent releases with over 30 million downloads. Acrylic Nails, with over 80 million downloads. By the way, was developed by Firescore Interactive. Tie-Dye as well with over 100 million downloads. Soap Cutting, almost $90 million downloads, was also developed by Firescore Interactive. And Amaze with over 76 million downloads. Now, I bet you're wondering how many people worked on each game and how long it took for each game to reach the #1 spot and the $5 million revenue. So I took here a few examples just for you guys to understand the ballpark of the manpower and the efforts until these games reach the $5 million mark. So Soap Cutting was developed by Firescore, started as 3 people when they started developing Soap Cutting, and it took them 12 weeks to reach 5 million downloads, $5 million dollars in revenue. ASMR Slicing, 3 people, 7 weeks to meet 5 million. Tie-Dye, 5 people, took 7.5 weeks to reach 5 million revenue. And Amaze, 2 people, 8.5 weeks to reach the $5 million mark. And before we move forward, I think it's very important for a lot of developers to really understand that hyper-casual eventually is a business model. And when you're looking at this business model, you need to understand the process of how to develop, test, and publish a game. And in order to publish a hyper-casual game, it all comes down to how profitable the game is. And when you're looking at the profit of the game, we're looking at the marketing cost, how much does it take for us to acquire users, and how much revenue these users bring in. What is the output, the average revenue per user? And when you have a big publisher, a top publisher, this publisher can simply multiply this for as much as possible. And this is very important. So the top publisher will be able to enhance the marketing and use the in-house tools in order to reach the $5 million mark as soon as possible. So I gave here a few examples of two hyper-casual games. On the left, you're seeing here Tie-Dye. On the right, you're seeing one of our recent releases. And when you're looking at hyper-casual games, I think there's a very few basic points which are very important. First of all, hyper-casual games are rely on data. And data is the most important thing in order to understand if the game has potential, and if this game has potential, what needs to be improved in the game, in the full cycle of the game, from the first initial testing process until the game reaches a point where it's released, and in the live ops as well. So we're looking at a lot of data points, and if the developer has this access to the data in order to understand what kind of things you need to improve in the games and the concepts, you'll be able to have a better chance of improving games and having a good hit ratio from the concepting to releasing. A few examples of data that is very important. Obviously, what is the CPI? But if you drill down to deeper into that, what is the CPI per creative? Which creatives perform better? What is the CTR per creative? And when you're looking at further down the line, things like the day one and usage, and furthermore, obviously, most of these things are available on the Click dashboard, which allows developers to submit games and see the data in almost real time to collect and understand what needs to be done next. And I think more importantly is when you're looking at these hyper-casual games, we're trying to understand who will play this game. So hyper-casual games are able to reach millions of downloads in a very short period of time. And the basic reason for that is that hyper-casual games must appeal to a very wide variety of audience. We need to appeal to anyone who can play these games. It can be myself, it can be my mom, it can be my grandma, and it can be you. And the way that we're able to get this mass appeal is by having a very contrast colors, very trendy themes, very easy to understand gameplay. And these are things that are very important in order to understand how to be successful in hyper-casual games. And lastly, I want to stress out that in hyper-casual games, you must fail in order to be successful. So you must test more and more prototypes and concepts until you find the one that has the potential to be a number one hit. And we have studios that are able to test 2, 3, 4, or even 5 games until they have a hit. And we have studios that test even more than that. And a lot of developers really need to have the willpower in order to understand that you need to let go of concepts that don't have the data to support a hit game. And you need to understand when to stop. You need to understand when you still need to iterate. And this is very important. When you're looking at the publishing process, this is a very good example of how to publish successfully a hyper-casual game. And what are the benchmark and key points where you understand if you need to move forward down the line and what needs to be done next. So the first thing, as we discussed, is to understand if this game has the potential to be a number one hit. The way that we measure that is to first have a CPI test to understand if the game has the marketability in order to be scaled with millions of downloads in the top charts. And the way to do that, you set up a CPI test. If you have good CPI, then the next thing that you would do is add more content to the game. Now, at this point, what we're looking to achieve is to understand, okay, now this game has the mass appeal that we are looking for, low CPI. We're able to acquire tons of users in a very short period of time. Now we want them to be retained. We want them to continue and enjoy the game and play for as long as possible. So at this point, we're going to add more content to measure the day one retention. How many players come back after the first day of install? If we pass that, the next thing would be add more content for day 7 output test. At this point, what we're looking to understand if this game is profitable, and what we're looking at for the as you saw in the first few slides, if the output is higher than the marketing cost, then the game is profitable, and only then we're able to move to the next step, which is the scale test. At this point, what we're going to do is launch the game and start buying users as much as possible, uncapped. What we're trying to understand is if this game has the ability to stay in the top charts for as long as possible. Now that we understand that this game is scalable, we release the game worldwide. The full flow of this publishing process takes between 4 to 8 weeks. And we understand this is a very short period of time. However, it's very important to use the data to leverage it and to make it as fast as possible. Guys, if you have any questions on that, by the way, this would be a good point to write them in the chat so we can answer them later. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is, sorry guys, something is lagging a bit, is ask Surojit to enter the stage. Surojit, the co-founder of Firescore Interactive and the head of studio of CrazyLabs India, to tell us a bit about the process that Firescore started as a small studio, testing a few games with CrazyLabs until they found the first hit, moving down the line, having multiple hits. And this is very exciting for everyone to get this information from firsthand studio that had this multiple success in hyper casual games. Surojit.
Thank you so much, Shai. That was really insightful, by the way, and I think we're really helpful for a lot of studios out there, to understand the process. So, guys, if you remember, we are kind of picking up from where we left off at the last Hyper Games conference. And today what we want to talk about is to discuss the relationship between a studio and a publisher, and how that relationship can be extremely fruitful for you and for your studio. Before I go into a little bit of the details of what I want to talk about, I'll give you a little bit of intro on Firescore and what we do. So Firescore has been around as a company since 2018. We only started working with CrazyLabs in late 2019, and we built about 2 or 3 games before we had our first success, which was Soap Cutting. And Soap Cutting was, of course, the #1 game and app on the US App Store on Christmas Day, and all the way through New Year's Day 2019 and 2020. Ever since then, Firescore and CrazyLabs have shared a really fruitful and deep relationship, which has grown over time. And I'm going to take you through some of the steps and some of the things we learned along the way to build the company and the relationship with our publishers to what it is today. So what we're going to talk about is the 3 stages that we've identified as in the life cycle of a hyper casual game studio. So in particular, there are, of course, many more than 3 stages to a game studio, but the 3 that we're most concerned with are the ones we see almost every day. Phase 1, which is early days, where studio is quite small. Phase 2, where it's after your first hit, you're a slightly more established company. And phase 3 is when you have a few hit games and you're building a production pipeline for scale. And I'm going to take you through each of these phases of a game studio, and relate it with how the story of Firescore goes in each phase, and how CrazyLabs was a huge influence on us in a different way as we grew as a company. So to jump right into phase 1, early days. So a lot of times when you start off, a lot of us start off as indie developers, just one or two people. Maybe you grab a friend and you start making games together, and you're kind of just focused heavily within the course of 1 week or 1 month on one single game, or maybe 2 games at most. And your whole team, which is you and your friend, or maybe even up to 4 people, all of you working on 1 or 2 games at most within a month. All your efforts are going into those 2 games, and you're really focused mostly on production, on design, on level design, on art, and things like that. At this phase, I would say this is probably the most important phase at which a publisher could help you, because the first impact a publisher could have on you at this time is huge. While you are sitting and making the game, deep diving into Unity and figuring out the game design and the level design, the publisher can provide you with a lot of assistance around market research, around improving your mechanics once the game is tested, or giving you feedback on your art, your level design, or getting on weekly calls with you and constantly guiding you and mentoring you on how you can improve the quality of your production. And this is exactly what happened with Firescore and CrazyLabs as well. Right before we had soap cutting, we worked on a couple of games together. And during this time, this was the first time we had any exposure to a publisher. And we had weekly calls with Rotim at that time and Moria from CrazyLabs, who were guiding us and telling us constantly on weekly calls every week that, hey, we need to adjust our thinking in this way, or we need to attack the market from this direction. And those conversations, that feedback loop, that constant engagement with our publishing manager, it led to access for us to a lot of knowledge, information, data, and eventually that is what led to our first success, which was soap cutting. And at this time, I would say that probably what you're looking for, financially from the publisher is just basic survival financing. How can you get from month to month and actually just churn out as many games as you can, build a reputation, and build a portfolio of games that test well, and then look at how you can build a hit game out of that, or at least have some good tests going. Um, Now, before I jump to phase two, I think it's a very interesting discussion. Maybe pick Shai's brain a little bit on something. Shai, I'm curious. What do you guys at Crazy Labs look for when you're looking for a small studio? Or what are you looking for in a studio? That makes you want to sign them.
I think it's a good question. So obviously there are multiple studios that start at this point where you started, and they're reaching out to a publisher and they're trying to get onboarding to onboard with a partnership and a relationship in order to successfully test and publish games. And I think there are a few things that are very important for a studio to understand when reaching a top publisher. What would the publisher expect from them? So the first thing that I would look at is the communication with the studio. And you've mentioned it, and I have weekly calls with a lot of studios that we manage. And what we're looking to achieve and understand is how the communication with the studio is. Since, as you understand, would like to provide feedback and receive feedback from the developer. So it's a two-sided communication, which is very important. And if we have this kind of communication between the two sides, and the transparency, it will be easier for both sides to understand what to do next, what concept should be tested, what are the trends. And sometimes you see you want to hit a trend, sometimes you want to hit it before it becomes a trend. So if you have good flow of communication, this will be the key most successful thing in order to really understand the potential of the partnership with the studio. And the next thing I would say is the dedication of the studio. If you're looking to be successful in hyper casual games, we'll need to understand if this studio is fully engaged in the full process of the testing and publishing. And if we remember the first few slides that I've discussed about the process of the publishing, which takes 4 to 8 weeks from the concepting until the game is released worldwide in the stores. It's a very short period of time. And if the studio has the dedication and the willingness to be fully involved and dedicated into publishing a hyper casual game, this is one of the most important things that needs to be done. And of course, we'd like the studio to be innovative and understand that we're looking to publish innovative hyper casual games. And I think this is very important in the full process of the onboarding and looking at the partnership of an early stage studio.
Got it. Thanks, Shai. And just thinking back also, back when we had just started working with you guys, there were a lot of things that we were gaining, exactly what you said, in the process of those conversations. And it was that first success for us with soap cutting, which eventually led us to grow the studio and to actually move from what we're calling phase one today and into phase two. So the next phase of a studio, of a hyper casual studio especially, is what we've seen mostly when a studio has a hit, at least one hit, and a revenue stream. So it may not be that you are an existing hyper casual studio that's grown to 5 or 10. Maybe you're also coming from outside hyper casual and you have an established studio and a revenue stream. And here in this case, as a founder, as a leader, as a manager of the studio, you may not necessarily be looking to deep dive into each game. Whereas opposed to if you were a much smaller studio, 1, 2, 3 people, like we were at Firescore, where we were all looking at one single game at a time. Once we had the success of soap cutting, we actually scaled up the studio a bit, increased the size of the team, and started focusing more on process. And during this time, even our relationship with CrazyLabs, it expanded, and we wanted to do more games together. We weren't happy with just one soap cutting. We wanted to have the next hit and the next hit and the next hit. And to do that, we had to figure out how to increase our production to produce a certain number of tests per month. And in that time, we had to again now start focusing not just on one game, but on building 4, 5, 6, maybe 7, 8 games, every few months. And this takes a different kind of focus, a different kind of effort, and a different kind of attention from the studio and the leaders of the studio. So in phase two, that's what you're really looking at, and you're looking to try and hit a target number of X number of games per month being tested. And now at this point, uh, your publisher is going to fully be able to understand what the strengths and weaknesses of your studio are. And just like Crazy Labs did for us after our first game launched and did well with soap cutting, Crazy Labs identified that our studio was particularly strong at doing these types of simulation games, maybe ASMR style games. And we immediately started working together on the next few ideas, which were down that road. And it wasn't too much later that we actually had an amazing CPI test and followed with a great launch of a game called Acrylic Nails. And again, the game was born purely out of a partnership between us and between Firescore and CrazyLabs. We worked together to identify the trends and to build some of the technology and to actually get the game to launch. Both sides were involved heavily, and it was a complete collaboration from beginning to end. And the reason this collaboration could even happen was because we already had the trust built from a previous hit, and we had that relationship going, and we had started to expand our operations. So we knew we could now tackle a second game as well. Um, and at this point, again, what you're looking for from the publisher is to be able to cover your operational costs as you've grown the team now, and you're trying to build X number of games per month. And of course, as a studio, if you have a hit or 2 hits, you of course have the access to the revenue stream to grow your studio as much as you please. And that's kind of what we see in phase two, and the kind of gains that you can have from a good relationship with the publisher even after your first hit. So it's not just that, hey, we had the first hit and we're resting now. We want more. We always want more, and Crazy Labs is always pushing us to get more, and we're always pushing for more and more tests and more games and more successes. So yeah, and that's pretty much what we see in the second phase of development.
Surojit, perhaps the audience and would like to maybe understand, at this phase, the phase number two, once you already have a hit and you're growing your team a bit, if you can pinpoint or if you can let us know what was different for you as a studio at this point. It can be either from the partnership with the publisher, with Crazy Labs, or even anything else that can be identified as differently now that you have at least 1 or 2 hits in your portfolio.
So I think immediately what happened was we, Crazy Labs forced us to start thinking a little bit bigger, because from working on 1 or 2 games at a time, and as a founder of the studio, being completely focused on just one game, for example. And my co-founder Karan he leads the production on all of our hit games. So for both of us to move out of just one game and then to look a little bit bigger, look more strategically, and because of Crazy Labs, because of publishing managers, we always had access to knowledge and strategic discussions on what our next 6, 7 games should be. And it wasn't just about one game or 2 games. It was about, okay, what is the strategy going to be going forward? If we're going to test 50, 60 games a year, how is that going to play out? What are the strengths of our team, and what is going to be best for us to move forward to get the maximum number of hits out. And so that it was a mindset change more than anything else. It's you go from one level of thinking to the next level of thinking, where you think more broadly, more strategically, And yeah, again, like I said, the acrylic nail story is basically, it came off from a deep collaboration. It's a direct result of expanding our mindset and expanding our relationship as well.
Interesting.
Cool. So let's move on to the next phase that we've seen, which is now, the studio is big, maybe 10 plus people. Sometimes we've seen even 30, 40 people in some places. And here now it's time to start thinking annually. And you're not, no longer thinking about, a few months of production or how you're going to meet goals, an X number of tests per month. You started thinking annually. You already have a great pipeline of games, successful games. And you're focusing on now scaling your production from, say, if you were at 5-10 games a month, that, what are you going to do next? What is it going to look like every year? And how are you going to attack the market on an annual basis? And so again, you're expanding your mindset beyond what you would do if you had just 1 or 2 hits. Here you're looking to really build a big company. And if you are really that important to a publisher, where you are producing many hits one after the other, uh, you will start being looked at as a strategic partner to the publisher. You're not just any other studio, but potentially, you could grow a territory for them. You could grow, like, for example, Firescore and CrazyLabs are working on a new initiative, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute, where Firescore is a territorial partner with CrazyLabs, and we're able to get new studios signed for CrazyLabs in India. And, our relationship has grown to now being just more than just another studio that builds hit games. And it doesn't have to be a territorial partnership. For example, it doesn't have to be based on geography. I'm sure other publishers will have different kinds of deeper relationships with studios that allow them to do different types of things as well. Yeah, so that's the phase 3 of the life cycle of a hyper casual studio. Like I said, there's many more phases throughout, and you could go in different directions. But this is generally the kind of phases that we've seen studios go through as they work with us, or as they begin to work with us. Now, I'm going to tell you about Crazy Hubs. The Crazy Hubs is an accelerator program that we've started, that CrazyLabs has started around the world. There are hubs that are starting in Mumbai, Tel Aviv, Istanbul, Warsaw in Poland, Serbia, and South Africa. And the concept of the hub is that it's an accelerator program where you, as an individual or as a team, can join and get a 3-month crash course in hyper casual gaming and game production, and potentially even build a hit game with the help of CrazyLabs. And if you're looking for a great opportunity, then I suggest you sign up for the Crazy Hubs and try and take advantage of this, because it's a really innovative concept, and it could really help you build a successful studio from scratch. For now, I'm going to hand it back over to Shai.
Thank you, thank you, Surojit. I think it was very interesting and very detailed information for a lot of studios to really understand the full process and the cycle of a studio that started as a small studio, testing a few hyper casual games, trying to enter the market and build a relationship with the publisher until the time that it had the first hit, and then the second and the third hit. And I imagine that a lot of studios would like to achieve this kind of success and partnership with the studio. So thank you very much. And I think that we have a few questions from the people in the chat. So feel free to write down your questions so we can answer them now. And Alex, do we have a few questions?
Yeah, of course, guys. First, shortly, I really appreciate both of you. It was really inspiring. I want to be part of Crazy Hub myself, actually. And also, I want to thank attendees. You do amazing work. You bring so many interesting questions. We have a lot of stuff to talk now. So let's begin in the order of upcoming. First one, if $5 million was average revenue, what was the profit for the studio?
Good question. And of course, it changes between the business agreement between the publisher and the studio. The $5 million mark is just a mark that I showed for studios to understand the publishing opportunity and the revenue opportunity from a hyper casual game, and how long does it take for that to happen. Obviously, this was at the very early beginning, only a few weeks to the launch of the game, and further down the road, more millions came after each game was successfully launched. And again, it changes between the business agreement between the publisher and the developer.
Thank you. The next question, can you share an idea of the margin in this business considering the intensive investment in user acquisition?
It's another good question. Obviously, in hyper casual game, the margins are lower than, let's say, mid-core core games where they are fully based on in-app purchases, and while hyper casual games are 98% based ad revenue. So in order to scale a game with lower margin than other genres of games that are in the store, you must be able to scale. And in order to scale, you must have the mass appeal. And this all goes down to the first few slides that we've discussed here in this webinar, which are very important for a lot of studios to understand what are the key points you need in order to successfully launch a hyper casual game. And in order to reach the $5 million mark and the top charts, to be the #1 spot, you must have the mass appeal in order to acquire the mass or the number of users to be highly profitable.
Thank you so much. The next question, Shai, you have mentioned testing. So the question is, by testing, do you mean gain experience by releasing the games or doing the CPI and CPR tests?
So the first funnel of the testing process would be a CPI test. So you have a very minimal build and focusing more on the video ad that we're going to market the game, since we're going to understand what's the marketability of the game and what is the CPI. Now that we have low CPI, only then you invest in moving down the road and in adding more content, moving to the usage and day one retention, and later on to the full publishing stage. So the first thing you would do is have a CPI test with a minimal bid.
Thank you. And going back to benchmarks, what is your CTR CPC benchmark?
So currently, CTR is less of a focus for us. We're more focused on a CPI. So the first test that we need the developers to do is a CPI test. And the KPI for us is 30 cents and below in order to move to the next step of the day one retention and the usage test.
Thank you. What percentage of the games you do a CPI for reach the next stage? So have a low enough CPI.
If I understand correctly, trying to understand the percentage of games that are able to pass CPI, and if we're looking at each individual studio, and I've mentioned that here in this webinar as well, some studios are able to have a game pass CPI in the first time they test, the third time or the fifth time, and some studios have a lower hit ratio and are able to get a low CPI only on the 10th or 20 or even 50 games until they have a game that passes CPI. And I think it's very important to a lot of studios to understand, yes, you're going to fail before you're going to be successful. And you need the willing power and the full dedication of you and the team to understand that you need to test as many concepts as possible, innovative concepts, in order to pass CPI. Listen to the publishing managers, read the marketing materials that the publisher will send you about the market strategy, about trends today. And if you are able to have this partnership with studio, with the publisher, you're going to be able to improve your hit ratio and have better chances of moving down the path of having good, successful KPIs and hopefully publishing multiple hyper-casual games.
Thank you. The next question, can you give us state of how many failures on average for one success? Not only for 20% more successful developers, but for the other 80% as well.
I think it's kind of similar to the previous question. and there's no benchmark for it. So yes, 20-25% hit ratio is amazing, but some studios have a very lower, a much lower hit ratio. But again, listen to the answer of my last question, and you'll be able to improve your hit ratio.
Thank you. Is there any example of a successful self-published hyper-casual game?
Hmm. Since CrazyLabs is a publisher, and there are studios that are trying to self-publish games, I think it's hard to understand the success of self-publishing. If you're looking at a publisher, Surojit also mentioned that there are tons of things that you're able to leverage and use from the publisher that you're collaborating with. It can start with the marketing abilities of a game. And if you were going back a few slides, we saw that we're looking at the profit and the margin between the CPI and the output. And if you have a big publisher, he's going to be able to multiply that endlessly until the game reaches a point in its life where it starts going down. And if you're doing it on your own, you're not going to be able to do that as scaled as a publisher can. But more than that, looking at the market overview and looking at the trends today and trying to hit a trend before it becomes a trend. By the way, a good example of that was soap cutting that was developed by Firescore and was published by CrazyLabs. Actually started the whole ASMR trend, and we got to the point where we saw that we're able to make a trend out of it and not come to it when it's already a trend. And this is a very good strength of building a partnership with the publisher other than self-publishing. And of course, Surojit also mentioned that after you have hit a game together, or after you tested a few games with the publisher and you built already a partnership, you'll be able to understand the strength and the weaknesses of each sides, and you're able to collaborate better together. If it's on the technical side, if it's on the marketing side, if it's on the level design, and Surojit mentioned a few more, and these are very important.
I just want to jump in here and add to the answer that Shai gave. And from a studio perspective, it's basically self-publishing comes with a lot of costs, a lot. And like there's things you don't consider that's beyond just the marketing costs. Like Shai was saying, it's art, QA, UA, PR. It's like a whole 20-person team that's working on this tiny little, what looks like a tiny little hyper casual game. But you have like a lot of people that work on it to get it to launch. So those costs can become significant.
Definitely, very good point.
Thank you so much. And actually, good question. The next question is good for some short discussion. Please tell about the largest upcoming trends. Also, what can you say about blockchain trends in hyper-casual games? And which countries are the biggest players right now, and which give the better stats in terms of percents of relative growth?
It's a tough question, I would say. If we're looking at countries, you would understand that the US market is the biggest market for hyper casual, although there are other markets that are still big, however, not big as the US, if it's all of Europe and China and tier 3 as well. If you're looking at trends, this is something that you will need to discuss with your publishing manager in order to understand if you are working on a concept that is hitting a trend or even being advanced to the trend, or if you're too late to the trend itself. And there are different sub-genres in hyper-casual games. It can be a runner game, an arcade game, a simulation game, an ASMR game, and other many sub-genres. And in each sub-genre, you see different trends and different things that are being launched today in different in the App Store. And if you have the ability to have the good communication with the publishing manager, you'll be able to have either weekly calls or chats with the publishing manager in order to understand if you are on the spot and you're hitting a trend, or you should not work on this concept, scratch that, and move to the next idea in order to avoid overspending and resources and time and improve your hit ratio.
And one more comment regarding blockchain in hyper-casual games. Is there any games with blockchain in hyper-casual?
Sorry, I didn't understand the complete question.
Now, one more mentioning was regarding using the blockchain in hyper-casual games.
Blockchain. Okay. I wouldn't be able to have any good answer on that, and this is not something that we are focused on.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, how does publishing for all program work? Which kind of support will CrazyLab provide exactly?
Great. So I understand that some of the studios saw the Publishing for All initiative, which is an initiative that is now offered by CrazyLabs for studios. And this initiative actually started since we understand, as a big publisher, we're looking to publish hyper casual hits. And on the testing process, there are some games that passes the funnel at the point where they're not able to fully be scaled. And for a big publisher, we're only looking for these hit games. But some of the games are still be able to be profitable. However, not as profitable as needed for a big publisher. But for the studio, they can still be significant revenue, even if it's a small revenue stream of a game that is being published. So what we've identified and offer for studios that work with CrazyLabs is even if this game fails in its scale or the output stage, and we still are able to publish the game, although not at scale as most hyper-casual games that are being published by CrazyLabs, we will still publish this game and create a steady, small revenue stream for the studio that can be good enough for the studio to continue developing more concepts and more hyper-casual games until they find the next hit together. So I think, for small, medium studios, the Publishing for All opportunity is a great opportunity. If you test games with CrazyLabs, it can improve it can give you more opportunity to still get games published. And some of these games, by the way, have a very good significant revenue stream for the studio that can very much sustain them and even be very profitable for them.
Thank you so much. One question to Surojit, please open the presentation again. This is asked from Svetlana. And yeah, great. Okay. And my next question is coming to you. Actually, how Firescore found team members with similar goals? What can you tell about that, Surojit?
Well, so we actually had a team that was around from a previous company. My co-founder Karan ran a previous startup, and our two main people in the team, our lead developer and our lead artist, who had been working with him for multiple years before. So we were lucky in that way that when we started, we had two people who were really really capable and who we already had a relationship with. Ever since then, though, it's been difficult to build the team because of COVID, the pandemic, and lockdowns. In fact, when we went from phase 1 to phase 2 as a studio, we hired 10 people who we've never met. We haven't met them yet. So hopefully one day soon we'll be able to meet them. But it's difficult to get people. I think you should keep your loyal people around as long as possible. Sorry, Shai, you were saying something.
No, I said you probably didn't meet them physically.
Yeah, we didn't meet them physically yet. Exactly.
Yeah.
Crazy times. Thank you so much. Okay, the next short 3 questions I would like to join into one, and they are about CrazyLabs conditions. What are the publishing opportunities in India offered by CrazyLabs? Revenue share from CrazyLabs, and do you provide funding, investment, or coaching, or both?
So it really depends on the partnership and the portfolio of a studio. And when you're approaching a big publisher like CrazyLabs, some of the studios would need some financial support. And of course, if this studio has the capabilities or the potential to be a close partner with CrazyLabs and potentially publish multiple hits together, yes, CrazyLabs will be able to discuss some kind of funding as well as revenue share. And I think the first part of the question was regarding India.
Yeah, publishing opportunities in India offered by
Mhm.
CrazyLabs.
We publish worldwide in all stores. It can be the US, India, China, Europe, and all geos as well.
So the short answer is all opportunities. Okay.
All.
Um,
But if you're looking at, by the way, if you're looking at specifically India, if the studio is located in India, so we do have, regardless of studios that are working closely with us that are located in India, we have the India hub, which is also managed by Firescore, that a lot of studios are able to apply and perhaps join the accelerator of the crazy hubs in India or other places all around the world, as Surojit mentioned.
which city is it in India?
It's in
Uh,
Mumbai.
yeah.
Mumbai. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Could you tell us more about your game ideation stage? Which resources do you take into consideration when coming up with an idea?
So the ideation phase is the first phase and the first part of the full process when you're looking to test and publish a hyper casual game. And since this is the first part, it's the most important one in order to uh, go test and be successfully continue the flow of a hyper casual game. When we're looking at ideation, it can be either a call with the studio and discussing different ideas and concepts that we found either on the store or on different social platforms like TikTok or YouTube or Instagram and others. And in this ideation part together, if it's done by the studio itself or a collaboration of brainstorming with the studio and the publishing manager, what we're going to try and understand if this concept and idea has the potential to become a hyper casual game. A few things that are very important in this ideation process is to first understand what would the video ad look like. Since this would be the first test, the CPI test is focused on the video itself. And then what would be the core mechanic? How would the player play the game? What are the controls? How do you win? And if you have a fail, how do you fail? And only after you're able to fully understand that, you go into the prototyping process and then prototype the first video ad and build.
Thank you so much. Surojit, maybe you would like to add something regarding ideas generation. What do you personally do to generate the perfect idea?
I think everything Shai said for sure. But to add to it, maybe something that could help would be, and it sounds like really generic advice, but keep your eyes and ears open. Everything, everywhere can be an inspiration. I could take a walk around my block right now, and I'll probably think of three ideas. Just looking around, probably. And there is inspiration everywhere. Even when you're watching shows on Netflix or Amazon Prime, there's popular things and trends that come up that you could base off a movie or a show or something like that. And so if you keep your eyes and ears open and you'll understand what's going on, what are the trends in the world that are taking place right now, and you can apply that and gamify those into hyper casual games. So I'd say, yeah, keep your eyes and ears open.
Thank you so much. Great. Thank you. The next comment is related to Surojit. Nice to meet you, Surojit. I'm a professional board game designer, but cannot code myself, unfortunately. Does your company do work for hire?
Yeah, we do. If we find talented people, of course we'll try and work with them. So of course, please, like, get in touch on LinkedIn. We're open to discussing anything, and especially if you're based in India, that would be a great advantage. If you're not based in India, there's always CrazyLabs who's based all over the world, so maybe you can apply there as well.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. Can you talk more about publishing for all program requiring KPI? Also, do you offer a paid to prototype program? If so, who can I contact regarding it? Do you pay for prototypes?
So the publishing for all, as I've mentioned, is something that we offer to studios in order to have more chances of publishing a game. There's no specific KPIs that we're looking at. Of course, the only thing that we're that we understand is that you're going to have good retention and usage in order to have a game that is profitable. But as we mentioned earlier, the publishing for all helps studios that have a game that passes down the funnel of testing a hyper casual game, but at a point the CPI, for example, increases. And if it starts 20 and now it's 60 or even more than that, most publishers will dump the game and tell you, stop working on it, we're not going to be able to publish it. But we as CrazyLabs understand that it still might be a profitable game at lower scale, and even 60 or 70 cents is still good enough to publish on a lower scale. But of course, you still need to have good usage and retention. And of course, we do offer funding and some paid per prototype agreements, depending on the partnership that we have with the studio. And mentioned earlier in the webinar, what are we looking for in a studio? Communication, dedication. These are things that we're going to look at, of course, before we sign any agreement.
Thank you. The next question, what do you think about hyper casuals and CPIs after iOS 14.5 update?
So after the iOS 14.5 and the IDFA changes, we've shifted to test to Google Play. Actually, a lot before that, we've started testing and allowing developers to test it on Google Play in order to be more familiarized with the platform and understand the process. And it's a simple change. It's not very dramatic in terms of what we are looking at. And changes in CPIs, obviously, there was always a change between the CPI between iOS and Google Play. Therefore, the Google Play max CPI that we allow in order to be moved and pass the first CPI test is 30 cents or below, which is different than what we had on iOS. So that's the only change that we're seeing today.
Thank you so much. When you have released from 5 to 10 games, when and how do you decide if you keep supporting your previous games or more onto new ones, given that they are doing moderate revenue generation?
I think this is a good question, since a lot of studios and some of the developers are thinking, if I have a hyper casual hit, how long will it be until it dies? And if you asked me this question maybe 2 years ago, I would say hyper casual lifetime of a game is short. But we know today that this is totally different. And even if you look at the charts today, take a look at the top 100 or the top 200, you will see CrazyLabs games that were released 2, 3, and even 4 years ago. And these games are still up and running in the top charts. And we see that these games are still able to generate significant revenue stream. And it's all depended on the dedication of the studio. Since here at CrazyLabs, we have a dedicated team that is fully on board only to maintain and continue to develop the games that were launched earlier. And what we're seeing is that a lot of these games are able to continue generate very, very significant revenue, even 2 or 3 years after they were launched. Since we know that you'll be able to continue endlessly develop the game, add more content, A/B test different features, and all of these are, of course, the marketing efforts, create more creatives, talk to the marketing team, and be very innovative on that side as well. And with these efforts, you're going to be able to sustain the game for a very long period of time and not stop working on it after a few months.
Thank you so much. Next question will be related to both of you, Shai and Surojit. I would ask you both to comment it. How can we stay focused on working with hyper-casual games during early stages, because it generally takes 3 to 5 prototypes being tested?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question.
Should I repeat it? How can we stay focused on working with hyper-casual games during early stages, because it generally takes 3 to 5 prototypes being tested? So meaning you have in the pipeline, you have several games on a similar stage. So how to focus or how to spread the time, how to prioritize.
I think that, looking at the data, you'll be able to understand what to focus on. And if you're able to get access to this data, you'll be able to fully understand which concept have more potential. For example, let's say you set up a test and you've uploaded, I don't know, 2 or 3 concepts that you've been working on the past week. Now, all of them are currently being tested and then you're collecting the data in order to understand how to prioritize your efforts and resources in these multiple concepts that you're testing. Simply talk to the publishing manager or log into Click Dashboard and look at the data per per concept. And when you drill down, you'll be able to understand a bit more, not just the CPI, the overall CPI, since we'll be able to test each game on different platforms, starting at Facebook, TikTok, Snap, and others. Moving down and drilling down a bit more, you're going to be able to understand the CPI per creative and the CTR per creative, and then usage as well. And all of these data points are going to be able to guide you on how to prioritize your efforts. And of course, speak to the publishing manager, and you'll be able to get some advice from the publishing manager side.
Thank you so much. So Surojit, do you have you had this problem in your studio? What did you do?
Like I said, you have to evolve as a studio beyond a certain point. And at first, for us, we were doing 1 or 2 games at most at the same time, which was manageable. Like my co-founder Karan, would lead 1 game or 2 games, and I would lead another one, and we would eventually be able to focus. But when you grow as a studio, you need to start thinking about your own time and how maybe you need to hire somebody to manage game design or documentation or manage the day-to-day activities with the developers and the artists. So yes, it's very difficult to focus on many games at a time, but you can solve that problem by hiring well.
Thank you so much. The next questions, what are the main parameters to be considered when making a hyper-casual games?
So the first thing that you're going to look at is the CPI. So this is the first thing that we're going to measure. As we mentioned, the first thing that we're trying to understand if this game is marketable and what is the marketability of the game. For hyper-casual games, we're looking at scale and we're looking at the game to be appealing for a very wide variety of audience. So the first thing would be the CPI. Then you're going to look at the retention, trying to understand if the core mechanic and the gameplay is good enough for players to come back and play and enjoy the game for as long as possible. So these are the 2 things that are the key points for you to first look at when you're testing a hyper-casual game in order to understand if it can continue the testing process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Regarding the most of the releases of CrazyLabs and the recent ones, could we say that you do not believe much in classic hyper-casual runners, arcade, puzzles, but rather ultra-casual titles focusing on interest?
So looking at CrazyLabs portfolio, we do have all of the variety of the games that you've mentioned. And yes, we are focused on all of them. We're not specifically looking only for runners or only for ASMR or any specific subgenres. Speak to the publishing manager to see what kind of trends that we see today, either on the different subgenres or the different themes. Essentially, we're going to be able to publish any hyper-casual game that can be scalable and profitable regardless of the theme or the subgenre that it is.
Thank you. The next question, who is testing the game before the release? Not technically. Do you have a group of testers and do you have a budget for it? I guess this means playtesting the game, probably.
Yeah, if you're looking at the studio perspective, I would say if you have a concept that is playable, give it to your friends. Don't say anything. Don't explain the concept. Don't tell them how to play. Don't tell them what to do and see how to play. this is the best, amazing, cheapest, I would say, testing group possible. But you are able to get free access to Click Dashboard with free testing. And this way you'll be able to get specific free testing for all your concepts, if it's retention or usage or CPI. And please apply so you'll be able to get free access.
Thank you. Seems like we're running out of time, so this the last question for today's webinar. Is CrazyLabs already using audio ads?
No, we're not focused on that at the moment, at least.
Good. I believe our time is over for today, at least what we have promised to our attendees. So not to hold you out of your schedule, we want to thank you for coming, thank you for watching, and for amazing questions. And Shai and Surojit, what you told us was absolutely amazing and inspiring. And I hope Crazy Hubs will inspire a lot of people to participate in this market and to make their own hits.
Alex, thank you very much. Surojit as well. It was a pleasure being here, and thank you everyone for all of the questions. And of course, feel free to reach out and apply for the Click Dashboard or Crazy Hubs all around the world. You'll be able to apply on CrazyLabs website, so crazylabs.com. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot to Hypergames Conference. Thanks, Alexander. Thanks, Shai.
Thank you, guys. Have a great time. Into hits. Bye-bye.
Bye.